specky, ginger hair, really short, like English from the countryside, who stutters and beatboxes. That guy doesn't become a pop star.
Well done, Edward. That was good.
You'd have gone back to my high school, into my classroom, and gone, who in this class is going to be in a song with 50 Cent and Eminem in 15 years, rapping with them? Like, which one? It's so unlikely. But it's like, I believe in speaking things into existence.
I think, like, it's like making it in music, yeah? For example, my career. For me to make it happen, I had to be deluded. There was a long period of time I was just deluded, thinking like, because bro, I'm going against the grain. It's rare. It's same like love. It is definitely rare. Maybe I'm a bit pessimistic. I don't know, but it's like you're going against the grain, trying to secure something rare. I feel like you just have to be a bit deluded.
People counted me out and thought that I wasn't going to be able to come back the same way, and I wanted to prove everybody wrong.
Candace delivered Layla on May 13, 2009, and she was practicing and working out 2 weeks later. Shouldn't have been, but that's Candace. And when Layla was 6 weeks old, Candace was playing back in the league.
I think Candace was one of the very first role models that showed people you can play and be an athlete and also be a mother.
So the topic that I want to talk about today is the double-sided coin of delusions. And delusion in itself has a negative connotation as a word. Supposedly that is something that is not real. But I also want to come back to the topic of faking it till you're making it. It has its place in delusion, and in a way it's not so much faking it, it's so much as believing something that is very, very unlikely. And unlikely in a sense that sometimes if you're too immersed in the reality of things, the reality is, so to say, the reality in terms of this material world, in terms of concreteness and numbers and probability and statistics, in a way that, well, what are the chances? It can really create that barrier for your own self to believe that something is possible, where in fact it can be possible. And what makes it possible, and I would say this is maybe the difference between delusions, which are delusions as almost toxic positivity and avoidance and denial of the reality, and the delusion that actually moves you forward towards your dreams, is that those delusions that move us forward, they're not only about the perception of the reality, they're not only believing something against the odds, against other people's perception and stuff, but it's also about putting in the work and effort. It's also about responsibility. So
you live in your car? Like you live in this car we've been riding around in all day? Like this is your home?
Well, poetry doesn't really pay. And I mean, you get it. We're artists. We don't chase coin, we chase inspiration.
Sure, in theory, but no, fuck that. An artist also needs to eat.
But it's also the practical aspect, the aspect that does take reality into consideration, but it takes reality into consideration not for the purpose of the perception. It's not something that is affecting your beliefs or estimating almost what is possible. It's estimating things in a way to see how much effort you need to put.
I always knew that you just have to work harder than everyone else because there's always going to be someone that wants it more than you. I looked at all my peers and was like, well, you're playing one show a week. I'm going to do 3 shows a night.
At the same time, it's also that belief, that delusion is what moves you forward in a way that even when the odds seem very, very unlikely, when the odds feel like almost impossible, that is what you need to move you forward. And so I think it's very important to make that distinction, and it's something that at times we use the delusion to deny the reality of the situation.
Is loud music a Long Island thing?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
What
Sure.
It's funny because my father is actually one of... Oh my God! Did you see what you just did? This is wall crepe. Wall crepe. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm gonna go to the ladies' room. I'll be right back. Actually, would you mind watching my purse for me?
For sure.
I will be right back. I'm sitting there!
When I say we use it to deny the reality of the situation, sometimes we deny something that, you know, brings us pain, or something that we might not even enjoy doing, but we are going forward with it. Or we are just creating that toxic positive screen to deny our own feelings about the situation. But in that, we're not actually moving forward. We are really using the energy to block something instead of open something up. And I want to say there is different feelings to these delusions, because there is a delusion that almost like a feeling of being in love, the feeling of you're just so intoxicated by the idea of something, to the point that, you know, that gives you energy, that propels you forward, that creates a certain expansion. And then there is also understanding that it's not just going to happen by itself, you know, that it takes a certain amount of effort. Like, that is the reality perception, that the reality perspective in it, the practical aspect. And I feel I really want to emphasize that two things of delusion and practicality, delusional practicality, if you will. I see that separation almost in between those two worlds. Spiritual world, where there is this huge emphasis on those higher chakras, and it's almost at the deprivation of the lower ones. So people who might not have a physical, like don't have their material needs satisfied to a point of sometimes even survival, go into that delusional avoidance and denial of those things in the name of spirituality, where their situation requires something different. It requires that practical focus. And then I see the opposite extreme of that, where people are very disconnected from the spiritual aspects, from those other like higher chakras, and really so focused on the material, on creating. They're well beyond the survival, they have more than enough, but they're just so focused on creating the material wealth, accumulating things, accumulating resources, indulging in the material things and senses, that I disconnect from the spiritual aspect. And I see that as a split, and I see it in myself, I see it throughout, you know, in different circles, with different people. And, you know, like I can really see that delusional practicality as almost like coming together of that split, because we do need to be aware that we control something very, very crucial, and that's our perception, like how we perceive our experience of the experiences. I read that, I like this phrase. I was rereading this book by Gabrielle Bernstein, Universe Got My Back, the books that I read a while back, and now I'm coming back to a lot of those books and concepts, but I'm coming back to it from a different place, where I am kind of having that strong emphasis and strong appreciation for practicality of life and understanding of hard work and discipline, and, you know, almost if you're familiar with astrology, I would say like channeling those Saturnian and Martian energies into it. Speaking of which, the full moon in Pisces is coming up. Every time the full moon happens, the moon is in position to the sun. And so right now it's happening at the axis of Pisces Virgo, and interestingly, I would say it's the perfect two signs to represent that duality of practical versus spiritual world, right? Where Pisces is very much like the deep spiritual waters, the dreamy aspect, the almost like that delusional perception of reality. It has its own reality, it creates a fantasy and it lives in its fantasy. Virgo is very much about practical, mundane, little details, and those practical little things and aspects of the everyday life. And I think it's very important to balance them, and it's very important and maybe a very can be a difficult task to untangle what is delusion and what is reality. And I was having a conversation with a friend recently, and she was talking about a relationship, and she was trying to see how to perceive somebody sharing something with her about where this person is in terms of his life and commitment and other things. And what I realized and what I found really interesting, and I think it's really interesting to bring into this into this perspective, into this topic too, you need to know where you stand and what you want and what your boundaries are and where you want to go before anything else is in the equation, before anyone else is in the equation. So it's a very hard thing to do in trying to separate those things when you're like emotionally entangled into something, whether that's a relationship or a job or something else. It's very easy to slip into different mindsets, and some of the traumas might get triggered and all those stuff. And while ideally we always have time and space to work through them, sometimes we don't. And that's why it's very important to know what it is that you're focused on. Where is it that you're going? And what is that perception of the reality that you want to live? And in that way, you don't have to force other people to come and, to force them into that picture. You can either see whether they align or they are not, and it becomes easier to move through things and easier to set those boundaries when you have a clear picture of the road you're going to. Even when the things end and even when the things don't work out, we always have a choice to perceive it. I can perceive it in a way that I'm getting closer to what I truly want and desire, or I can perceive it in a way that I made a mistake and I'm a failure and this person is abandoning me and I'm not good enough, and a whole lot other stories that I'm creating about it. And this is what makes I would say, a real difference in terms of perceptions, in terms of manifesting, in terms of delusions. It's not only about the stories of the dreams, the things that you want, and it's definitely not about hiding difficult feelings, but it's more so perceiving the situations of why did they happen to me, and not making it about me and not making it into like a victim story, but really creating those situations and seeing those situations for what they are, and also seeing them for what they are realistically too, in a way like what can I learn from it. It's really separating those three things, like perception of what it was in a sense of that higher purpose and the why, and where I'm going, versus the practicalities and those small, again bring it to astrology, Virgo things in there, like those little details are still important. We are not completely like avoiding them and not looking at them. The details are important, the little things are important, the practicalities are important, but they're important insofar as taking almost like very much in a Virgo way, taking notes of them, making a list, or like learning from it in a very, very practical way, but still being deluded in your own way with the bigger picture of life, bigger perception of, you know, the life that you want to create, of your own dream, of your own, you know, romanticizing the reality in a dreamy Piscean way. It may seem so crazy to other people, but you're holding on to it because it's your dream and only you know what is possible. And those things can be possible because you yourself believe that they are possible. And in this case, that belief, that dream is the most important thing. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great full moon. I'll leave a couple of prompts below the video that might be helpful, and they're just things that are coming up for me based on this conversation and based on the energies that are happening right now. Thank you.